thanking us, but we appreciate
Man.
you taking the time to come on here.
Yeah, thank you for even considering me.
Absolutely,
Truly.
man. To like grow that. One of the things that I loved about the answers in your questionnaire is that you use the word vulnerable a lot, and like healing, connecting with other men, and I think that was a big.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for why we started this.
Yeah,
I met Manny through Desiree,
yeah.
and I mean, I feel like right away I kind of got the energy from you that I was just like, this is like you have your very own vibe, like
Thank
your
you.
vibration to you, and it's a very positive and uplifting one. And I
Thank you,
always
brother.
enjoy our conversations. That's why I thought you'd be a great guest
Yeah.
for this, and
Thank you.
we're excited to have you here today.
Honestly, I can really say the same about you, and I don't mean that because we're being recorded. Sorry, I broke the third wall, but
We break it all the
okay,
time.
okay.
You're
But
good.
I truly, genuinely, when I met you, I was like, wow, this person seems very kind. He seems very like in tune. He seems like he's very introspective. Like he thinks a lot, and that was really cool. So it was awesome to have that conversation with you because generally speaking, I am very kind. I am very willing to be vulnerable, to the point where like one person in particular asked my current girlfriend, is he really that nice? And then she's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, well, that's weird. I thought it was weird. He was weird before, but like now it makes it even more weird. And for a little bit, it kind of made me go, dang, that sucks because like I'm actually being genuine. But I understand it. I get it. Some people are, put off by somebody being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to be genuine and kind and things like that. But it genuinely makes me feel happy to be the way that I would want other people to be with me. So when I spoke with you and I met you for the first time, you kind of reflected that as well, and I was like, oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
It's so weird because when you meet the boyfriend of a friend or your girlfriend's friend's new boyfriend, it's kind of like it's a formality to meet the person. Hey, yeah, I heard about you, cool, yes. But then like when it clicks, it's like, great, like this is gonna be great. It's not gonna be like, oh, okay, we're going to see them tonight or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was awesome.
There's a lot of those fake relationships that exist out there, and I think it can be cool to find like to be like, oh, I actually like this like is another level of connection that I can.
Dude, I'll go even further. One of the friends that I met through my girlfriend, she recently went through a breakup, and the guy that she broke up with, I texted him and I was like, dude, I hope you're good. I know that breakups are not easy. You guys were together for a long time, but like if it's okay with you, like I would love to still be friends. And he just texted me back, dude, we didn't break up. And I was like, all right, yeah, like let's do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's always good. It's always good to be appreciated, but also to be able to appreciate somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, do you want to just give the people listening and watching a little bit of background on yourself? Just a little introduction to who Manny is?
Yeah. So my name is Emmanuel Jimenez. Originally, I'm from the Bronx, New York. I came up here when I was 16, which is Beacon, New York. I'm a real estate agent now. Prior to that, I wanted to be a career martial artist, or a mixed martial artist, I should say. And that's still kind of like in the back burner, but I focus on being a real estate agent now. I work with Compass. The team that I work with is Upstate Curious. Shout out to Bree and Diana, because they're my mentors and they've been very, very instrumental in helping me understand how to do this and be authentically myself and give the clients the best service that I can possibly give them. So I'm very grateful for that. And that's me. I'm just a regular guy trying to be my best self and understanding that if I just do that, then that'll be enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
That's a great way of putting it. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we overcomplicate things a lot, and sometimes it's just like, how can I be the best version of who I'm supposed to be?
Yeah. I was talking to a friend about that on the drive back home, and I was saying, man, like that's all you need to be. We have this thing in our lives called social media, and I don't mean to speak about it like in a woo-woo way, but it's just the reality. Like we have social media, we have Hollywood, we have TV shows, we have music videos, we have all of these things telling us what we should be, what we're lacking, how we should sound, how we should dress, how tall we should be, how much money we should make, all of these things. And we kind of get drifted away staring at that and comparing ourselves to that, to either our favorite content creator or whatever the case might be. And I think that if you are your best self, or if you're trying to get there, and if you figure that out, I think that that's enough. I'm a person of faith. I believe in God, and I just feel that, if the God that I believe in created the heaven and the earth, what's seen and what's unseen, what's comprehensible and what's not, if he created all those things, yet he created me, and I say he just as a placeholder, but yet that creator created me, then I must be great, and me being my best self, being the best creation that I can be, is enough, because God is most certainly more than enough. So, and it also says in the Bible that you were beautifully and wonderfully made. So if I believe that, and I believe in God, and I don't believe that, God is a liar, or God's going to lie to me or to us, then the best is just enough.
Yeah.
The best that you can be. It's not about, people always say like, oh, especially when we talk about dating, like, just be yourself. Like, well, what if yourself is like lazy, overweight, and like this and this and that?
Yeah.
Like, no, be your best self. Don't be your best self for the person that you're trying to attract. Be your best self for you, so that when you wake up in the morning or lay your head at night, you're comfortable in your skin and you like who you are. And I always say, I say it in Spanish, Nunca deja oro que cambia lo que sangre te dio. What that means is never let gold change what blood gave you. And what that means is like your morals, your beliefs, the things that your parents taught you or the people in your life taught you. Don't ever let gold or the shiny things or the things that you may aspire to that may not be fulfilling for you. You may think that it is going to be fulfilling for you, but it's not. Don't ever let that change what blood gave you, what your roots gave you. And it all ties into the philosophy that I have in life, which is being a rooted man, a man who's rooted in his morals and in his beliefs, in his faith, all of those things. So yeah, that's like one of my key philosophies in life. Don't let gold change what blood gave you.
Nice.
Yeah.
You talk about faith, and one of the first questions we have down is I'm very new to it. JP's been had his experiences with it as well.
Yeah.
But like, what was the thing that got you into it? Is it something that started when you were young as a family thing? And like, what has faith? How do you think faith has really impacted your life?
So, faith has been probably the biggest impact in my life. I just, as far as back as I can remember, I just have always been told about God. My mother used to bring me to church when my father and mother were together. We would go to their church, my father's family's church. And my mother didn't have money to pay for a babysitter, so it wasn't that she necessarily forced me to go, but immigrant parents, it's like, where I'm going, you're going. We don't really believe in babysitters, so, and we couldn't afford one. So I just went to church. When they separated, God was always spoken about, but we never started going to church until one day. I think I was probably like 12 or 13, and some random guy just came up to me in the Bronx and was like, do you believe that, do you know that Jesus Christ has a plan for your life? And I was like, kind of, sort of. And I just remember going to church that night. I was like, oh yeah, what else am I going to do? And seeing all of these people, just being young, being Christian, and being unapologetic about it, and that was very untraditional from what I saw when I grew up. But it really impacted me because it faith is so much more than just saying I believe in God. It's centered around beliefs. It's centered around improving yourself. It's centered around the understanding that there is something above you, and that, although you don't see it, all other faiths say it in different ways. What goes around comes around. The law of reciprocity and all of these things. So, it has given me so much, and I can't give it back enough. I can't give what it gave to me. So faith has been super crucial and impactful in my life, and in my personality and my mental well-being and all those things. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, that was a great answer.
Yeah, that was a really good answer.
Great answer.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with faith, like I said, I grew up like with it being drilled into me that you got to be religious and stuff like that, and then like you get these kind of when you're young, you get these formative beliefs about that this is what religion looks like. And then now as I've gotten older, it's like it can look like kind of whatever you want it to be. And like you said, like it's not just the idea of like, oh, I believe in God. It's like your faith and like your morals and things like that. I really like that. Like, it can be your own kind of definition of whatever you want, like within reason.
Yeah,
I guess,
of course,
you know?
of course.
Yeah.
Within the guidelines
Yeah.
Of the faith itself or of the religion.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. But I like I said, just to reiterate, I think it's important to understand that your faith is not just a thing that you say, it's a thing that you live out and that you believe and that you practice. But I think what you're trying to say, if you don't mind me saying, JP, is that, you know, everybody has their own personality and their own way that they're going to live out their faith. It doesn't look one way or the other, which kind of ties into what I was saying about the way that we probably either envision our lives or want our lives to be, or envision, you know, a version of success that we've been sold for just the purpose of us being a consumer. It's like, you will be the best version of yourself. You will be yourself. You will live out your faith in your way, based off of all the other ingredients that have been put in you in life, you know? So yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, like, in terms of like social media, but I deal with it all the time in my own personal life and things like that.
We all do, man.
The idea of like being enough. It's like being enough, you know, in the case of faith, is, am I enough for God? Am I enough for the people in my life? Am I enough for what I've been blessed with or whatever? What has your journey been like with becoming more and more secure in who you are and having enough, and whether it's, like I said, whether it's money, whether it's like your like dealing with like the perceptions of other people, what is your approach to that? And like, have you always looked at it this way, or was it kind of a journey to be like, I am enough?
How much time do we have? So
all day, brother.
So there's so many things I can say, and I feel like the question has so many layers. I definitely, so I didn't have my father in my life. The separation was very early, and to not get too much into it, when he was around, it wasn't a stable environment. And I think that when you grow up without a father, and you don't have that male figure in your life, it's almost always a recipe for insecurity, because you don't have that person that you can go to and say, hey dad, how do I talk to this girl? Or how do I deal with this bully? Or how do I deal with this weird thing, you know, because you're going through puberty and you're going through all of these things. And of course your mother's there, and sadly, you know, mothers who are single and independent have been sold this thing where it's like, you can be the mother and the father. And I understand that, and to an extent, well, actually no, I don't agree with it to any extent. I think that, you know, it's sad that a lot of people grow up without fathers or without mothers, and I think that in order to raise a kid in the most healthiest, optimal way possible, you do need the mother and the father. You do need, in my personal opinion, you do need the masculine and the feminine there. And not having that does leave gaps for other things. You know, you may find that masculine role model in other areas. You know, me coming from where I come from, New York City in the Bronx, a lot of people found that father figure in a drug dealer, you know, or in somebody else, or in the person that ends up molesting them or anything like that. So it does leave holes and gaps in for you to be vulnerable in ways that maybe you shouldn't be. But, you know, it's tough. It's really, really tough. And I grew up, you know, riddled with insecurity, you know, although my mother, something I will always say, and I give honor to my mother, is that where there was hell outside, my mother made heaven in home, right? And she was really good at that. But, you know, being a mother working, you know, more than 2 jobs, just coming home to shower and sleep for like 30 minutes and then go to the next job, it's kind of hard for her to even try to be the masculine, which frankly she never really tried to be, you know. I did have a tough aunt though. She was pretty good at knocking me down. But yeah, no, it definitely was a journey to get to that point, to be secure. But I do have to go back to my faith, and I also have to give credit to my older brother. My older brother was so, and is so, impactful in my life. I call him the love of my life, because that's truly what he is. And you know, he would basically go out and come back and be like, don't do this, do that. You know, like when all the kids were sagging their pants, he'd come back and say, don't sag your pants. when they would talk about certain things and talk about women a certain way, he'd come back and say, don't do that, you know. And he learned the hard way. He really learned the hard way. But he kind of held his back. Hey, darling. He kind of held his back so that the arrows can hit him more than they hit me, which is something I'll never forget. And then I had, you know, my grandfather every now and then. But another impactful person was my mentor, who I met, that man who told me, hey, do you know that Jesus Christ has a plan for your life?
Wow.
He was this like awkward, energetic, you know, he studied, you know, theater and drama in high school and college, and he was so authentically and unapologetically himself, and I never saw that really. And that was something that was very impactful to me. You know, people would say that he was awkward, people would say that he's weird, people would say that he's gay and all of those stuff. And he just didn't care. He, every day and every time, whether it was in church or outside the church, he just showed up as himself. And seeing that made me go, wow, I want that. That's amazing. And it stemmed for him from just knowing that he is himself and God made him that way, and he's just going to thrive on that. So I feel like multiple people contributed to that. I can't say that it just came from one thing or one experience. However, there was one moment, and I'm going to get a little graphic here, but there was one moment that really shifted for me, which was, I remember one night, I was so just insecure, and I remember I something in me, I was just tired of it. And I just stripped myself bare, looked at myself in the mirror, and I was just like, you are enough. You were beautifully and wonderfully made by God, and that is enough.
How old were you when that happened?
I would say I was about 16.
Wow.
Yeah, 16 or 17.
That's amazing, man.
And I was just tired of it, man. I really was. I really was just tired of being so afraid, so insecure. I'd like always wear a hoodie. I'd try to, you know, conceal myself. I was very depressed, and you know, through faith and through speaking with my mother and my brother, and just being introspective, also, you know, being in the gym. You know, the gym was very impactful too when I moved here, because there was just a whole bunch of adults, you know, men who were working, men who had families, you know, men who were all trying to improve in this one endeavor. And being around those older men really was impactful for me too. I got to not only learn, and as we do in life, I got to not only learn what to do, but I got to also learn what not to do. And that was also very impactful. I'm grateful to God that happened. But in that night that I'm speaking of, you know, I just was at a point where there was a thought process in me that there has to be more than this. And what if I just shift it around? You know, what if I just decide to love myself like other people have shown me before? What if I just decide to accept the things that I'm insecure about, accept the things I can't change, and change the things that I can, and leave the rest to God? And that night was very impactful for me, and I'm very grateful for that night, because from there on, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows, and it wasn't easy, but from there on, it was worth it, and I just work at it every day. You know, there's always going to be something that we're either insecure about or not sure about, but that's okay, because that's part of the journey of life. You know, it doesn't, that never changes. And if anything, I welcome that voice now, because that voice, that thought process, that uncertainty, that fear, like what I was saying to you guys, like, oh, I'm starting to feel those jitters. I know now that that's my body, my brain, my spirit operating properly, and it's communicating to me. And all I need to do is just listen to the communication and take it from there, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm so scared of that or whatever. It's like, no, it's fine. We'll take the information, we'll take the feedback. Heard this beautiful quote recently: failure is feedback. And we'll take that feedback and we'll just keep going. Yeah.
You mentioned how impactful the gym has been for you, and I think for both of us, it has definitely helped change the mental state, and it just, there's something about pushing your body to the limit that helps you embrace that, like, you can do extremely challenging things all the time if you really want to. So I know you're big on martial arts. If you want to get a little bit of background on that, and then just how that discipline has translated into your day-to-day life, and how you use that to kind of keep you going.
Yeah, so, you know, my grandfather was a martial artist, and all of his brothers from what I can remember, he told me, were martial artists. They did karate and kung fu and taekwondo and judo and boxing. And I remember this one moment in particular. I was watching one of the old UFCs at his house. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, let's watch this. And he was one of those grandfathers who was kind of like, sit down, let's observe, and then we'll talk. So I remember seeing these two men fighting, and one of them fell down to the ground. And in my head, because I'm accustomed to the culture of the Bronx, it's like if the person's on the ground, they lose. So I'm like, oh, world star, he's gonna get knocked out. And then the guy just did something. I don't know if he did a rear naked choke or something, but he ended up winning. And I was like, Grandpa, what the heck was that? That guy won, and he was on the ground. His back was on the ground, and he smiled, and he goes, that was jiu-jitsu. And I was like, whoa, whatever that is, I want to do it. Because prior to that, my thing was like Krav Maga, Kung Fu, but that was impactful for me. And I was like, I want to do that. And it just so happens that in high school, there was a dean who was a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is the second belt. And he started off an underground Jiu-Jitsu program for like all the reject kids who didn't make it to the wrestling team or whatever, who didn't do any other sports. Just so happens that I was one of those kids. Immediately I was hooked. But my desire to learn martial arts truly stems from just feeling vulnerable and taken advantage of, and having, family members in my life, more particularly women, who couldn't defend themselves. And I never wanted to be in that position again. I never wanted to be in a position where a woman that was around me who I thought I had responsibility for, or a disabled person or a weak person or a younger person or even myself, I never wanted to be in that vulnerable position again where I could not defend myself to my utmost capability. At the very least, I would go down swinging, efficiently. And that was where it really stemmed from. It was like, I want to keep me and my people safe, or the random woman walking across the street who screams, or the random kid who's getting bullied, or whatever the case might be. Being bullied made me want to stand up to the bully for myself, but for other people around me. So that's what prompted me to want to learn that. And then, being in the gym, like I said, experiencing the cultures, the different beliefs, the different, spiritual and political ideologies, and all of those things was very impactful for me as well. And like you said, pushing yourself to that limit or close to it is very, very natural and primal. And I love that because, as men, we have a lot of energy. We have a lot of emotions. And at least in this time period, there's a lot of people telling us how we should be and how we should act, and how certain things that are natural to us are wrong or toxic or whatever the case might be. I get that. And I get that there have been very bad representations of men throughout history, and even in current time. But I do think that there's something to be said about positive and productive aggression, and getting your emotions out there in a way that's not breaking tables or, being violent with somebody, whether male or female. For me, martial arts provides me an avenue to do that, to not hurt my training partner, to not hurt myself, but to have that aggression and that competitive nature about it. It's the same with running or lifting. It's slightly different, but you get to really get that energy out and get that aggression out. And I think that it's also beneficial for women too. It just so happens that I'm a man, so I only know the male experience.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of what I've heard is that people, or in particular men, because I just feel like martial arts is more popular for men, get into it for the reason that you did, which is like, I want to be able to defend myself, I want to be able to do that. And then what ends up being the most important part of it for them is the kind of community that comes with it. Oh my gosh. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
The community it ebbs and flows, because there are parts and pockets of the community that are very, immature or whatever. It's like with any community, there's bad representatives, and then there's great representatives, and then there's everything in between. But the community is second to none, in the sense that, at least in mixed martial arts, or, I would say effective martial arts where you're sparring, like wrestling, boxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, those kinds of sports that actually allow you to play and allow you to pressure test. There's something to be said about the close connection that you make with the other training partners, because there's a vulnerability there that you don't get. I kind of relate it to when gladiators or people used to fight, or when people fight in modern day. You always see those movies where people are fighting in World War II, and there's always that one guy in the bunk, and the guy's like about to shoot him, and he looks at him and he sees his humanity, and instead of the propaganda that he was fed to be able to just shoot to kill, he looks at the person and he goes, this is another human being with a family, with aspirations. I'm just gonna not shoot him, and I'm just gonna move on, and I think that sparring or even fighting reveals that to you. You get to look at the person in the eye and say, I'm trying to hurt you, or I'm trying to achieve this goal, I'm trying to dominate you. But when we're sparring, at least in jiu-jitsu, if I tap, you let go. But that's never really discussed. It's just, we understand that. In the beginning, you discuss that, but after you've been training for a few weeks or a few months, you understand, if he taps, I let go, and that's it. But it's that trust and that vulnerability of like, oh, you got my arm extended, and if you keep going, you're gonna break my arm, or you're gonna rip my shoulder off my socket, or you're gonna choke me unconscious. I tapped and you let go. It's literally establishing trust every single time. And you go through the emotions of fear, anger, anxiousness. Like, you go through every emotion with that person, and then in the end you slap and dap, dude, good training, that was great. It's like, you don't get that anywhere else. You really don't. It's such a vulnerable position to be in, yet we come back every single time to train. We work on it, we drill on each other and all those things. We learn from each other. And I always say, like, we're closer to each other in the gym than people may think. We're probably closer than family members and best friends, and, for some maybe even wives, or whatever the case might be. It just, that vulnerable state, that state of vulnerability, that state of, I trust you enough not to break my arm, is something that you'll never get anywhere else but there.
Yeah, because it's truly like you have to have the utmost faith in somebody that they know how to pull not hurt you, because it's very easy to just they could just slip when they're going for a kick, or when you go to throw a punch and you just throw a little too much behind it,
and it could be a freak accident. I recently had a big injury, and it was totally an accident, and it was totally not the training partner's fault, and we weren't even sparring hard or anything like that, and one thing led to another, big accident, and he's just there, both hands on his head, and I just immediately was like, dude, I know it's not your fault, and I know it's it just is what it is, which, that's just life, right? You have mistakes, and some mistakes are more devastating than others, but you just got to see it through, I heard it once said, you got to eat the crap sandwich right away if you want to be successful. You got to that's one of the skills you got to learn.
Acceptance.
Yeah, you just got to eat it and move on.
I think I'll be it can be hard to do that, you know what I mean? But I think the sooner that you kind of are am I sitting in my own guilt, or I don't want to be honest with myself, whatever it might be, that it's like what you talked about before, being in do I have control over this? Yeah. Be honest with yourself. You know the answer. Yeah. And if the answer is no, accept it and try to move on. But I think that can be easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah. That's another thing. I was talking to a friend of mine about this. Me and my mom have this conversation a lot. I have a great relationship with my mother. I love her. And she's, I owe so much of my success in life and as a person to her. But something that we've talked about and that we mention a lot is that everything in life is simple, but it's not easy. It's simple to say, oh, in order for you to have a successful podcast, you just need to make, 250 videos and not quit. But nobody's talking about, the day that your dog passes away, or the day that you end a relationship, or the day that you're sick, or the day that, somebody leaves you a bad comment and it's just oh, I don't feel like doing it or whatever. It's simple. It's not easy, and most things in life, if not everything in life, is that way. So I completely agree with you. It may not be easy to, say, okay, this I can control, this I can. I'll just leave it to God or just let it be. But it's definitely worth it, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think also what can be difficult too is we beat ourselves up because some days those things are easy and then other days they're not. And then you're like, well, why 2 weeks ago or why a year ago was this so easy for me to get over? And then now today, like, this little dumb thing is like eating away at me. Like, I know I'm better than this. And then it's like, then you're in a double loop because it's like you're beating yourself up about that thing and then you're mad that you're mad about the thing, and like that can never end.
Dude, it's crazy you say that, because I kind of had something like that happen to me recently. And my friend and I were talking about it on the drive home, because he was saying, like, you know, I'm insecure. One moment I'm insecure, and the next moment I feel like I'm that guy and all of that stuff. And I remember saying to him, and he had already came to this conclusion because he spoke to his grandmother about it. But I said to him, you are both of those people. You know, that's just life. You know, one day you may be insecure, or one moment you may be insecure about something. The next day you walk in and you're like, I'm the freaking man. You know, but that's a part of life. You know, we all wear a smile, and a lot of us are just screaming underneath. You know, so I was once with those people, or that person, and, you know, I just got to a point now where I don't necessarily scream underneath. I just scream out loud and deal with it, let those emotions go, and then move forward. You know, thank God I have an outlet like jiu-jitsu where I can choke somebody out a little bit, you know.
I think like I think a lot of times too, like, especially in those formative years when maybe you're a teenager, or even like I realize it now that like you thought that when you were a teenager you'd know who you were when you were 25, but then you realize that like that's really when you're really finding out who you are. That if you put yourself in a position or you find yourself in a situation that you can't control, and like you said, I think insecure is a good example, but it could go for being angry, or it could go for being frustrated, or a ton of things. And then in that moment we decide, I don't want to ever feel that way again, I'm not that. And then as you get older you just realize that like you're always going to have an array of emotions, but if you keep focusing on the fact that that one thing is like defining you, that's like a never-ending loop. And you're trying to like if you're saying like, oh, I'm not an angry person, but then like everybody gets angry, it doesn't matter, like even the Buddhist monks in the mountains, you know, to a certain degree get angry too. And you can't like get upset about that, but like it goes back to the idea that like some days that's easier to
and also too, you said something, and it just, I don't know why, but it came to my head, but I thought to myself, you said, you know, you think you know who you are when you're a teenager, but then you realize you don't. Well, maybe you do know who you are, you just don't know that you're going to become someone else. You know, you just don't understand that through the process of life, you're always becoming. You're always growing into something. You know, I hear a lot of my friends say, you don't know who you are, and after 30, like, you're established, that's who you are. I don't necessarily believe that, but I understand kind of what they mean, or what I believe that they mean, how I perceive it to be would be, you have your foundation, and then after 30, it's kind of like, you know, you're moving on from there. But a lot of people, like, they say, oh, you're set in your ways after that. I don't necessarily believe that, but I understand why people say that. But I think when we're teenagers, we don't really see the long game. You know, we don't see that, oh, we're constantly improving and evolving and things like that. So it's kind of like we do understand, or we do have a little bit of a grasp of who we are in that moment. It's just a thought I'm playing with here. But as we grow, you know, we come to realize, oh, I'm always going to be moving on. And I feel that as we get older, it would be better to embrace those emotions and understand that those emotions are people, or not people, things that are just going to visit us from time to time. And we should be able to have conversations with those emotions and understand them, and understand where they stem from and how they are. Easier said than done, like we're talking about, but I think it's crucial, you know, to be able to self-reflect. Why am I feeling this way? Why that when this person said this or looked at me a certain way, what did it bring up for me, and why? And you can, you know, go back to, oh, this time that this happened or whatever. I don't always believe that it goes back from your childhood, but a lot of times it does, or some moment from before. But yeah, just familiarize yourself with those emotions and those feelings, and let them communicate to you, because that's what they're doing. They're communicating to you.
You're very emotionally in depth, and you're very introspective.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that because you don't find those conversations with just every guy that you sit down and talk to. And I know talking vulnerably and openly amongst male peers was something that you definitely wanted to speak on.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's very crucial, especially in the day and age that we grow in today, because there's so much stuff, like you said, on social media, and if you don't have the right role models, things are just getting fed into you. And we are sponges. We absorb everything, especially from a younger age. We're in our 30s, you're in your 20s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've grown a little bit, and you can kind of wring out the sponge and be like, that definitely doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
How do you go about getting these where do you think it came from with you, where you're just I can be in depth with myself and then communicate this to somebody else? And how do you feel that having those conversations with others really improves your life dynamic?
So, going back to my mom, so my mother would always have these things every week. She would call it a family meeting, and we'd literally sit down and just have a check-in. What has been going on, and part of it was because, like I said, she worked a lot, so she wasn't always there at the time. So she kind of just wanted to know, fill me in on what happened when I left you, and with some money so that you can buy some food, and or when I stocked up the fridge, and me and my brother kind of took that and adapted that, and we would do that with each other, and we would talk, among each other. So, like I said, when you grow up with just your mom, she can only fill the space that naturally she's meant to fill. And when she tries to fill that other space, there will be portions of that space that are not filled because she just can't, and there's nothing wrong with that. So for me, what that led me to be was very emotional and very vulnerable, and sometimes to my detriment. People would go well, dude, we don't want to talk about that, or whatever the case might be. So I did have to learn to adjust, and I did have to learn that there was a time and place for certain conversations and for certain levels of vulnerability. And things like that. But it definitely came from my mother and my brother, and having those conversations. But another thing is, that's another reason why I became a martial artist, because I understood people take kindness for weakness and vulnerability for weakness, especially in the environment that I grew up in. It was it's very misogynistic, very homophobic. It's bro, that's gay. I recall one time, I'll never forget it, but it's a proud moment for me because now I'm confident, comfortable within myself. But there was this time where we were in the Bronx, me and my brother, and I saw him. I was like, dude, what's up? I gave him a hug and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and I just remember it was in the street, broad daylight. You could hear a freaking needle drop, and my friends were just laughing. There was a big silence, and then they just all started laughing. But because we came from this Hispanic, unapologetic immigrant culture, we just looked at each other you don't kiss your brother on the cheek when you see him? We do that all the time, And then after, me and my brother just looked at each other, and we kind of understood, and we just gave each other another hug and a kiss on the cheek. See you later, bro, But that came from our mother and from my grandfather and from my aunt. My aunt would always say to me, you're not a kid from the street. You come from immigrant parents who immigrated here, who, started from the ground up. My grandfather was actually a doctor in the Dominican Republic, but he couldn't transfer over his credentials, so he had to start from the bottom. And he started, I remember my grandfather and my mom would always tell me the story how he was so proud that he got the medallion on his yellow cab, and just that kind of work ethic and those principles that come from the home country, that gave me a little bit of resilience, and it gave me the understanding to know that it was okay for those things. But through a lot of pain and scars that I still have, I learned that there are moments where those things need to be held back, and you kind of need to be a little bit more reserved. So now I kind of just test the waters first, ask a question, see how they, react, or as they call it now, the vibe check, But it is hard, though, to touch on the other part of your question. It's hard for men to be vulnerable because you don't know if you're educating an enemy, You may meet a friend and they may say, dude, I like that you're doing that podcast and all that stuff, and then here comes the backhanded compliment, or here comes you perceiving that it might be, So it's you don't have responsibility for how somebody takes what you say. You only have responsibility on how you deliver it, And I think that it's very hard amongst men because it's a very competitive atmosphere. And then you have what we're being advertised that we should be. You know, then you got to make 6 figures, you got to be 6 feet, you got to have 6 inches, you got to do this, you got to do that, and it's like all of these things are telling you what you're lacking or what you need to be. And you know, it just gets to a point where you have to just be internal with yourself and say, what is my version of success? What makes me happy? What is the kind of man I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? And then just run with that and tweak that every now and then, and grow into that. But I think that, you know, to answer your question, again, it was having those family meetings with my mother and my brother, and continuing that and having those conversations and having that very family-orientated growth unit, but also understanding that other men are desperately wanting to be vulnerable, desperately wanting to have conversations. Some men are not like that, which is fine, but I think that most men who I talk to, vulnerable doesn't mean like we're all freaking painting each other's toes or like crying in each other's arms or whatever. It just means like, hey bro, like, how you doing? I'm good. No, seriously, like, how are you doing? Man, I don't know, like right now it feels terrible, and like we can talk through that, you know. And I won't tell the other friend and go, dude, this dude was freaking shot when I saw him, or whatever the case might be. Like I can just be like, yeah bro, like I get it, like I've been there, or I'm there right now, let's go through this dark tunnel together. I think that kind of camaraderie really, really is useful and crucial for men, because we don't have that a lot, you know. Like I said, it's very competitive, it's very, I'm supposed to be this way and I'm not, and this is what I don't have, or what I should have, or what I should be. And when men start to open up with each other, I think it becomes healthier, but it also helps them grow and helps them realize they don't just have to unload to their significant other, you know. Especially with women, like they don't have to just show all their emotions to women. Some things I personally feel should be just kept to the people, your circle of guys, you know. I mean, I don't mean locker room talk, I just mean like real things, you know, because women just want to be safe, and that's what I said off camera, you know. I truly believe that that's what women truly want. They just want to be safe, they want to be respected, and you know, it's kind of hard to make somebody feel safe if all you're doing is just crying and down on your luck and like, damn man, it sucks, because they're gonna be like, dude, you're like freaking water, you're just flopping around, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, it's definitely necessary.
Yeah, no, that I think like that's very much become like the roots of our friendship now. Is that like, and I feel very blessed to have that, because like you grow up thinking that not only is that weird, or that like it doesn't exist, you know. You grow up thinking that
or that it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's wrong.
Men don't cry.
Yeah.
Just get over it, you know.
Yeah, and I think that that's like a beautiful way of looking at it, because it's like you said, it's as simple as that. Like, no, like really, how are you doing, man?
Yeah.
You know, like, and yeah, like, and I think that just like that ties entirely into just like the definition of what it means to be a man. And I feel like as a society that is kind of shifting. That we're starting to get to a point where it's like, no, the man isn't the one who just like goes to work and doesn't speak on his feelings and like, for lack of a better word, you know, mans up or sucks it up, however you want to look at it.
Who's just a producer. Like just protect and provide, shut up, and be a man.
The disciplinary figure in the house.
And there is a place, there is a place for those moments and that mentality of like, suck it up and keep going. Because with that, you're not going to be able to provide and protect, because there's going to be moments where you got to just stuff it in. And
it is like you said earlier, it's the yin and the yang. You have to have that male energy, but you also have to have that female energy in you.
But sorry, you were going to say.
No, I was just going to say that I think that as I've gotten older, I've realized that like that's where like the actual security and safety comes from, especially in like a relationship with a woman, is being able to be vulnerable. And that, like you said, it can be difficult because just like we have our own ideas about what it means to be a man, women have that idea too. And that like I said, I think it's starting to shift a little bit in terms of like women are starting to look for that. They want a man who can open up and talk about his feelings. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're water and you're just flopping around. But at the same time, I think that shows that a man can be like a balanced person.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what makes you more secure? If your parents were always arguing in front of you and saying like, oh, I don't know how we're going to feed you guys this week, or if they were like, how was your day at school? And in the back of their head, they were dealing with all that. You know? That's a better environment to be in. And I know that kind of sounds like, no, that's unhealthy. No, it's healthy. Those kids don't need to be knowing about bills and food and all those stuff. What they need to know is that you love them and that you're there for them. It's not about lying to them, but it's about withholding certain information from them that they don't even need to be worrying about. You know what I mean? Just to follow that analogy. And I feel like sometimes it's like that with your relationship, you know, with your partner. You know, like the security comes from, yes, you being vulnerable, but also you being able to shut up, suck it up, and keep going. And I recall a situation, my coach, my teacher, I remember I had a calf cramp and I was like about to cry, and he stepped on the calf and he said, don't cry. You shouldn't be crying about this. And when I was gonna cry, I looked at him, and him telling me that took away that feeling of wanting to cry. And then I realized, wait a second, I was looking for permission to be that way, right? Now, you know, some would say that was wrong of him, but I experienced the same thing when I was a coach. You know, I would have the kids doing jumping jacks, and some of them would make noises and huff and puff, and they would just look at you with this look of like, let me quit. Please let me quit. I'm huffing and puffing. I'm giving you the faces. I'm quivering with my lips. Please let me quit. And I would always say, you're looking at me, asking you to quit. I'm not going to let you. You need people in your life like that. And sometimes that person is you looking at yourself in the mirror saying like, I'm going to see this through, you know. Like you know, like if you don't mind me, and we could edit this out, but you know, you taking your test.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
Dude, I failed my test like 3 times.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I vividly remember making a turn and just like a movie screaming and shaking my freaking steering wheel and being like, ah, you know, like, because I was so upset that I failed. But then I said, I'm going to continue going. Until they give me a pass, I'm going to continue going. Even if I pass by a thin thread, I'm going to pass this test. You know, and you need that in life. You need that resilience. So you need that vulnerability, and then you also need that resilience at the same time. And that's what I believe. And that's why I call it so beautiful. That's why I call it being a rooted man, because you're rooted in those beliefs. You know, and roots usually have something above it, which is a tree. So you have to be both. You know, you have to have that masculine, and you have to have that feminine, but you have to know when those places and components have the floor. You know, it's kind of like if the kid falls and he cries and he scrapes his knee, the mom, you know, wants to tend to him, but the dad may go, no, wait, let him stand up, you know, because he understands, and the mother understands too. But in that moment, she's like, I had this child for 9 months. Get away from me. I want to pick him up and hug him. But the dad's like, no. He needs to learn how to get up. He needs to learn that we're not always going to be there. There's going to be a time where he's going to bury us, hopefully, if it works out the way it's supposed to. And that may be like, oh, gosh, that's going down a dark turn. But that's the reality of life. Yeah. You know, the reality is, you know, there are assholes in this world. There is evil in this world. There's negativity in this world. And it goes far beyond you hurt my feelings, you know. So if you don't know how to deal with that and confront that, dude, you're going to get stomped over. You know, so it's a great thing that women are like, yeah, I want my man to be vulnerable, but it's also a great thing that men understand the level of vulnerability that they're asking for, you know, the level of vulnerability that they actually need. And you'll figure that out, and you'll know that. And I'm not the leading authority on that, but I've learned that.
I don't know. You seem pretty so far in this conversation. Like, yeah. No, I think you're doing a great job.
It's come from a lot of trial and error, though. It really has, you know, and it's just figuring it out, you know, just letting the wounds turn into scars and not continue to open and gash and bleed in life. And then I follow that analogy with everything.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah. No, you're giving us a lot of great insights, man. And like in a lot of ways, I've been going through a lot of stuff lately, and a lot of what you're saying is hitting me very much.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm grateful to have you here, man.
Thank you.
So I will ask you, what is your, like you said, maybe just diving in a little bit deeper on that. Like, how do you approach it when maybe you feel indecisive about, is right now the time to be vulnerable, or is right now the time for me to pull up my bootstraps and get to fucking work?
I'm still learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I reach out to my brothers. You know, I reach out to my biological brother. I reach out to, you know, people in my life that are influential or whose opinions I care about. And there are even times where I go to my girlfriend and I ask her, because there's some things that women just know. You know, like I feel like if a woman does enough work, and just like men need to do enough work, don't misinterpret it, viewer, but it just like, if they do enough work, they can tap into that, what I believe is that God-given intuition. Women have great intuition. So sometimes it is good to go to the woman in your life. It doesn't have to be your girlfriend. It could be your mother. It could be your aunt or whatever, or a female colleague or friend, preferably somebody you trust, and go to them. You know, but I still make mistakes. You know, I really do. But there are a lot of times I make a lot of my big decisions based on self-reflection. You know, I literally go into the cave of my mind, or physically put myself in a room, and I just think about it. And I pray and I meditate on it, but I think about it, and I say, you know, is the next action that I'm going to make the action that the man that I want to be is going to make? And if that's not the case, I'll think about it more, but I generally, I think in that way. Not all the time I say that whole sentence, but that's generally what I'm thinking. The man that I want to be, does he do this? Does he act this way? And, you know, if you're following the conversation, you may think like, whoa, but didn't you say you don't want society to dictate, you know, the kind of man you want to be or whatever? I don't know. That's why I go back to my philosophy of being a rooted man. That's why I go back to never let gold change what blood gave you. You know, I go back to my morals and my beliefs. Does this align with my faith? Does this align with what my mother and brother taught me? What I learned from my grandparents? What I learned from, you know, these influential people in my life? What I learned from the Bible? What I learned from God? You know, so does it align with those things? And if it does, then I go with it. And if it doesn't, I search more, because maybe there's something that I do need to take out. Maybe there's something that I do need to take out that was taught to me before that's no longer serving me. You know, but ultimately that's what I say. Is this the man I want to be? Perfect example is like, dude, nobody gets on your nerves more than the people who are closest to you. And, you know, you may be arguing with a partner, and, you know, if I'm arguing with my girlfriend or something like that, there may be a moment where I want to yell, you know. There may be a moment where I want to say something that's outlandish. And, you know, I would be lying if I said that I never yelled, or that I never said something that I wish I didn't want to say, or that if I could go back, I wouldn't say it. But for the most part, I always say, the man that I want to be, is he going to say that to her? Is he going to react this way? Because I know that if I say something that if I go back I would change it, I'm going to think about it a lot. It's going to sit with me. And generally, that leads me down the right path. Always remember the person you want to be, and I feel that that will guide you into making the right decision, you know, along with, of course, God and things like that. But yeah, is this the man you want to be? You know, does the man you want to be want to steal, want to cheat on your partner, want to, you know, be greedy, want to treat a client disrespectfully, want to talk behind your friend's back who was just vulnerable with you? Is that the man you want to be? You know, does the man you want to be, you know, on mile 5, you know, quits when you said you were going to do 7 miles today? You know, does the man you want to be, you know, is he going to say to the guy that you invited to do a podcast like, oh, actually I'm not feeling it today, you know? Or does the man you want to be is going to be like, no, we're going to mile 7, you know, or we're going to do that podcast today, or, you know, or for me, no, we're going to service the client properly, you know, or we're going to make this decision. If that's the answer to that question, then do that, because that's the man you want to be, unless you decide you don't want to be that man, you know. Simple as that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times people talk about accountability, and they're talking about with other people, which is very important.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong with that, but I think sometimes like you have to just be accountable to yourself and be okay with the fact that maybe my partner won't agree with this, maybe my mom won't agree with this, maybe my best friend won't agree with this, but this is what I've set out to be, the person who I want to be.
Living your authentic life, being authentic to you, it's so important.
But also, sorry, this is like me being self-reflective, also not using that as an excuse or a crutch to not grow. this is the man I want to be. I'm gonna not dress well and be disrespectful and be unprofessional and be like this bohemian or whatever the case might be, and just like live life like c'est la vie and this. No, no. Be the best version of yourself. Determine what that is and live that out. You're not always going to be perfect, and it's not always going to be that, and you're going to learn from your mistakes, because like I said, failure is feedback. But you know, don't use authenticity as an excuse to be authentically an asshole.
Yeah.
You know, because authenticity goes both ways. You know, you could be in my community, in the martial arts community, like you can meet two black belts, and one could be a terrible guy, you know, and the other guy could be a great guy. One could be a world champion, and he's just a terrible human being, and the other one could be somebody nobody's ever heard of, but he's one of the greatest teachers you've ever met. You know, so the title doesn't justify the man; it's the character. You know, like the Bible says, you'll know them by their fruits. You know, or Martin Luther King said, I dream of a day where we're judged by the content of our character as opposed to the color of our skin. Like, that quote is so impactful to me.
I whipped out the Martin Luther King quote on us.
Like,
yeah,
like,
hell yeah, man.
It literally is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, man. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, we can go right back to where we started this conversation, is that people get caught up in what the like what you see of somebody. I think social media is a great example, but it could also be like what you see on TV or what you see, whatever, you know, who you portray on the outside. And number one, you don't know what that person's going through, and also that like you may look at them as being a success, but their marriage may be in shambles. You know, they may not be a great person, and that like you have to have these guidelines of what you look up to versus like, is the man you want to be just like successful on social media, or is he like a great partner? Is he a great father? Is he a great friend? You know?
Yeah, 100%. And I think also too, because I think a lot. I used to say I'm an overthinker, but I just think a lot, and I like to reflect a lot. It may be that the person is successful and a good father.
Yeah.
It may be like, I'm not the originator of this quote, but I always say, if it's not my cake, then I can't eat it. So I don't like when people say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, it's not my cake if I can't eat it. I can have my cake and eat it too. That's why it's my cake. So, you know, so it's like, you can be successful, you can be wealthy, you can be a good husband, you could be great in bed, you could be a good fighter, you could be a good fisher, you could be all those things. But you got to know the price, and you got to be willing to pay for it. That's it. You know, so, but if you achieve all those things, it doesn't mean that you're perfect. You know, you could still have an insecurity. You could still, you know, have things you need to work on. You're always going to need to grow and work on things. But, you know, I try my best not to think like, oh, he's successful, but he may be lacking in this. It's like, maybe not. Who cares? You know, I'll just learn from him or her, and I'll take something from, you know, what they have, and I'll adapt it to me, you know. But it's like Bruce Lee, he says, take what is useful, throw out what is useless, and adopt what is uniquely your own. And I feel that quote rings true in every facet of life, you know, every facet. One realtor may be successful doing this thing, and that may not be my thing, but I may want the success that person has, or I may want an equal success to what that person has. I know I can learn principles from that person and then move it forward into the avenue that I want. You know, like you have the avenue of real estate that you want to pursue. It may not be the avenue of real estate that I want to pursue, but I'm sure I can learn from you, and I'm sure you can learn from me, and we'll both take that to both of our avenues and pave the road the way we're going to do. With the same principles. You know, building a house is virtually the same. You need the foundation, you need the walls, you need the this, you need the that. But there's architects. You can be the architect of your life. You should be. You shouldn't allow other people to determine that. You know, so that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I want to touch on something that you said there, because like, and I guess like, and I don't want to assume anything in terms of like how successful you are in terms of real estate or anything like that. Like, I'm in a profession, a creative profession, like I do photography, videography, and I've always thought that the only way for me to be successful in it is by like having the best camera or being the best skill, you know what I mean, things like that. And I'm curious what your take is on the fact that, like, because I'm sure that maybe at some point you thought that like I have to be this hard-nosed like real estate dealer,
Yes.
but like you've probably gained a lot of success, or in however other word you want to define it, that by being the person that you are,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
has absolutely nothing
Yeah.
to do with
Yeah.
what you know about contracts or selling or anything
Yeah.
like that. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what you.
So, when I first started this profession, I always said I never want to be the jaded agent. I want to be the agent who looks at a client and sees them as a person and not a check. And I felt that, and I still feel, and I will always believe this: if I do that properly, then I'll get paid at the end, you know. And that's just how it works. But one of my mentors, her name is Diana. She said this to me once. She said, "If you are authentically yourself, everything will take care of itself. Yes, you have to know, contracts. Yes, you have to know the process of, buying a home or selling a home. But if you're just authentically yourself and you just focus time on doing quality work and not quantity, just do quality work for the people that you're working with, whether that's one client or 35. Quality work, be authentically yourself, don't force anything, don't give out that desperate energy, which is very hard when you first start real estate because you're pretty desperate, unless you have 6 months of savings, which I recommend. But for the most part, if you're like doing it full time, you're like, ooh, when is that next sale coming? So, but you have to be authentically yourself. Be your best self, but you have to be authentically yourself, and that is how it works. Ultimately, if you have the best camera, if I'm at the best brokerage in the world, it literally does not matter, because you can have all the resources in the world in any endeavor and field. But if you don't know how to use those resources, what value do they have? Seriously, if you give me all the tools that a carpenter has, I'm not going to build you a house. I'm sorry, bro. I'm not.
Yeah.
Not at all. Okay? I may build you a crappy desk that'll fall on day one. But if you give that to a master carpenter, or to somebody who does the profession, or who loves the craft, who's passionate about it, he's going to build you something great. So you have all these tools in life. It's better to learn how to use them. The tools that you do have. Run with that first. Build a good foundation. And then when you have, those shiny tools or those more efficient, tools, then you can take what you've learned using that small, knife, that Swiss knife. And then you can use that when you pick up the sword or whatever the case might be. So, and it's funny that you say that, because that's kind of like how my real estate journey started. I started off with a smaller brokerage. And I'll always be grateful to the broker that helped me. His name is Jose Santos. Dude, he's a great agent. Great agent. Not a lot of people know who he is, but great agent, awesome. He taught me a lot of great things, and I learned a lot of great things from him. I just understood that I needed to go somewhere else in order to be where I wanted to be, in order to hit the next step. And I know that I made the right decision, not only with the structure that's provided for me, but the support that I have with Upstate Curious, and with the two mentors that I have, Bree and Diana, and that answers the question for me every time. So to answer your question, I've learned, be authentically and unapologetically yourself, and know how to provide good service, good work, and whatever it is. You do those two things, you're going to be successful. And the reason why I know that is because people are hungry and desperate for authenticity, because we are all collectively trying to show something that maybe we are, or maybe we aspire to be, but in certain moments of our life, we're not showing our truest self, or our most authentic self. Maybe it's because it's not that moment for you to cry. You're on the 4 train getting ready to go to work. Like, you're not going to cry there. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe it's that, your son comes, you come home and your son is screaming with excitement, and instead of saying, dude, I need to go to the room and just chill out for a little bit, it's been a busy day, you're like, no, this is my son, I love my son, I'm going to pick up my son or my daughter, and I'm going to play with them, and then I'm going to go, whatever. So understanding those moments and when to do those things. But if you're authentically yourself and you know how to provide good quality work, that's all you need, in my personal opinion.
That's a great answer. Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, people do business with people, not logos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. And to tell you the truth, I've been to some places, I've traveled, certain parts of the country were very high profile people go. I've met some high profile people too. I've met some very wealthy people, and they are all human, you know. And those places that people like to go, those nice restaurants, and they all make mistakes too, and they all have things behind the scenes that are quirky because it's humans, you know. It's like when people say to me, "Oh, you're a Christian?" Well, I've met some of the worst people in my life in church. It's like, I don't doubt it. Because the people in that building are humans too. You know, it just so happens that they have faith and they think that there's a hole in their heart that only God can fill, which I believe that too. That's why it's there. The first display of love, in my opinion, was God giving us free will. Because the way that I see that was God saying, I want you to love me because you decide. Period. And I think that that's what true love is. True love is free. It's freely given and freely accepted. I can say to you, dude, I love you. You don't have to love me back. You know, it's freely given and freely received. So I think that, you know, the joke in it though is that God was like, but there's a hole that you're going to try to fill with addiction and money and this and validation that only I can fill, you know, because I'm the manufacturer. I got to leave my name on it. You know what I'm saying? But so yeah, no, I think that just be authentically yourself, man.
Yeah. Damn, man.
That's wrapping it right back into that, like, life is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's the way I remember a lot of things. I remember them in sayings. Like, it just, it helps me remember the principles that come out of that saying, essentially.
Yeah, basically like your, almost kind of like your affirmations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's like, no matter what, I'll come back to this, you know, when I'm feeling this way. Like, you got to remember that it's deeper than your perception of things. Like,
these are my roots. That's why I say that I'm a rooted man. Like, this is what I'm rooted in, and that I'm always going to go back to that. The seasons will change, but the tree always stays there, and its roots are always on the ground. And it's taking whatever's provided, and it's discarding whatever it doesn't need. It's just rooted right there. The seasons change. It could be winter, summer, fall, whatever. It could be raining. It could be snow. It's always there, rooted where it's at. You know, and that's why I call myself a rooted man.
Yeah. Wow, man.
yeah.
This conversation has been great.
Yeah.
I feel like
This
you are
came-
just a plethora of knowledge.
This came at a this came at a
Glory to
good
God.
time, I think. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah.
I know you had some questions for us that I definitely want to leave room so we can keep the conversation going.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I know the name of the podcast. You know, I know you enough to say hi to you in the street, but I don't know you, and I just met you.
We just met an hour or
And-
so
and
ago.
it really is interesting to me because I love the name, and I feel like I kind of understand what the name stands for and your thought process. But I just want to know, what is it that make you both say, "Who would have thought we would be here"?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I mean, I remember like sitting in your backyard when we were just like throwing names around, and I
Try
said
to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think
More specifically, sorry,
it's
and
okay.
we can cut this out, but
That's okay, dude.
The
We're not gonna
journey-
cut anything out of this. Like, this has been too good.
the journey that led to you guys saying,
Yeah.
that's a good name because that fits.
I think.
I think it's a good summation of our relationship, to be honest.
Yeah.
We've known each other since we were kids. We met in junior high, so we're
We're like 20 years of friendship at this point.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so for a long time, we grew up, like I said, we grew up together, and then when it was probably around when you went away to school and I started full time, like working in a restaurant, like we started to branch off a little bit, but we were always close. And then when you came home from your first job, and I got him a job at River Grill, and we got really close, but that also was probably the start of the dysfunction. I mean, it wasn't shortly after that, like I definitely had started my problems. My journey with alcohol started young, and I think probably around like 22, 23 was like when I started getting into drugs, like to try and fix problems. And shortly after that, like we lived together for a little while too, and I think my behavior just was the downfall of it, and we didn't talk for a while. So
Yeah, we literally had our bedrooms like right next to each other, and it was probably the least close that we ever were.
Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy? You could be so close. I heard this quote recently. Not recently, that's a lie. Like a few years ago. A few years ago.
He is
and-
human, no.
And this guy
Yeah.
said,
Mhm.
isn't it interesting that when we are so close, we yell at each other when we're upset? And what he said was, we yell at each other because although we can be physically close, we feel so far.
Yeah, I've heard this
You know?
before.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. When I heard that, I was like,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's
That,
amazing.
like,
But
rings
yeah.
So I don't think that could be any more true
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you and I think that that's probably why it was so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I guess like probably right around that time is when I got into things like that and kind of went down
Sorry, things like what?
things like addiction and I would say even more so like probably like a deep like codependency.
Yeah.
Not even just definitely in like my relationships with partners, but also in my friends. And I think that I've said this before on this podcast that like I took a lot of the responsibility of, does he not want to be close to me because I'm not being a good friend, or because I'm not enough as a friend, or whatever it is.
Wow.
You know?
Because most people would be like,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
they'd be
Well, it
like,
was
"I don't
something that
care,"
I
you
had.
know?
Yeah, exactly. It was something that I had to work with, and I still deal with. That I
Yeah,
still
yeah.
need to work on. Yeah, like we got very far apart. We didn't have conversations about like
yeah.
our values or what
Yeah,
was
yeah.
important.
which is very important when you
Yeah.
decide to live with somebody. Whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, there's also like when you look back on it, it's like we lived together and we worked like 5 days a week together.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I'm not like, I think that there was totally a way that we probably could have made it work
Yeah,
and
of
be
course.
close. You know what I mean? But
The
at that
ingredients
point,
at the moment.
yeah, but
Yeah.
at that point with what we were trying to, and what we were both dealing with, I think, and when we did kind of like go our separate ways, and like we didn't talk for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was probably like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think that a deep part of where the name comes from is definitely like in our own journeys. Like we never thought we'd be sitting here talking about mental health and being vulnerable.
That's
like
what I want to get to. Yeah.
that, but I think it deeply comes from a space of that. Like there was a point where I felt so hopeless that him and I wouldn't. be
Yeah, that
friends.
we would never talk again.
That we would
Wow,
just
yeah.
never be friends again.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Good for you.
And it was just
And that like maybe we'd see each other and we'd say hello, but it would never be like when we were super tight.
Wow.
You know, because I just remember like, you know, we were both like vulnerable young kids,
Yeah, yeah,
and we
yeah,
went
yeah.
through a lot of that together, and we didn't necessarily like talk about it
Yeah, yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and that's like that I would say is probably the best way to describe where the name comes from. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that it definitely, I think it describes us perfectly that way. I think another way that I look at it too is like when we sit down with guests, like who would have thought that we'd be sitting here having this conversation with you right now? Like it's not something that you can foresee coming. It's just something that has developed this way, and it's just kind of being open and accepting to like, who thought this would change? And I think for me, it comes a lot from getting sober. It's just like my life was so chaotic and it was so much chaos all the time that I was like, I'm never going to get out of this. Like there was just nights where I'd like look in the mirror, not like in the way that you did where you were accepting. I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, what is the end goal of this?
Yeah.
And I think when I did get sober and like around when we started this podcast, like I hadn't even been sober that long, but I was just like, this is crazy that I'm here at this point in my life. And I think it was a reason that I was like so like on board with the name too right away, is just because like
I think we knew when I
both of
said
our
it,
personal
yeah.
journeys, like
Yeah.
who thought like I would have made it to this point, like where now I'm doing
like,
this.
Yeah, there was there's points where like, not to be morbid, but like you would, you know, you're laying in bed with your heart beating so fucking fast that you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it.
No, 100%.
And I also think that for me now, in terms of like trying to be your most authentic self and be better and kind of like find yourself in places where you never thought you would be, I think it's a good motto for like looking at not how I look at just today, but how I look at the future.
100%.
That like 5 years from now, I might not be where I thought I'd be, but I'll be where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, man.
And taking that, because like I said, I'll just be honest about it, that like I struggle with the acceptance of the uncertainty. And like, where am I going to be? Am I going to be successful enough? Am I going to be enough of a man when the time comes? And I think that the name always strikes a chord with me. Like, and maybe I should think about it more often too, because now it's just like, oh, that's just the podcast, you know. But it's like coming back to the fact of like, yeah, like it doesn't necessarily just mean like, oh, you've come to this point now and this is where you are. It's like, where will you be 3 years from now, 5 years, 10 years from now? And it's probably not where you think you are or how you envision it, but you have to accept that if you stay within your values and you're doing what you're supposed to do, you'll be where you're supposed 100%. To be.
Yeah. It's like after every episode, I'm just like, you know, this has been episode 48. Like, who thought we'd be here still doing this? You know what I mean?
On like a more simple level too. It's that.
Yeah.
You know.
Dude, thank you guys. Thank you for saying that.
Oh,
thank you for your vulnerability.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
I always like to honor men, especially when they're vulnerable, because I know it's a hard thing to do.
Right back at you, man. Thank you.
And I know that it's different. It's different. When you were mentioning what you were mentioning, both of you talking about like just laying down in your bed and thinking like, where are things going? The uncertainty. Yeah. The same thing with me. Like I dealt with PTSD, and I dealt with anxiety, really heavy, and I know that feeling of like your heart beating. And I remember just thinking of all the ways that my life can go or would go, or just like literally all the endless possibilities that life can be, negative, positive. Like you could be you can choose this career path, you can choose that, girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Like you can choose to eat this, but then you can choose to do that. And I remember one day I just thought to myself, bro, you're never gonna do it all. You know, as much as that sounds like a buzzkill, it's like I'm never gonna eat it all. I'm never gonna freaking wear it all. I'm never gonna just never gonna do it all. So why don't I just get my one? And like that's another mini philosophy I have in my head is like, get your one first. Get your one pair of good shoes that you like, get your one relationship, get your one favorite meal, get your one. I feel like once you get that one out the way, get that one, like you don't know how this is going to go, where this podcast is going to go. Just do that one episode. Do that one season. Do that 1 year. See how it goes after. Don't worry about don't worry about the quantity. Worry about the quality. Get that one and enjoy that and do that to the best of your ability. And I feel like that's a thing that I have, a mental thought process or a mental note that I keep to kind of ease my mind and say, let me just get my one. When's my next deal going to come? Just get your one. Just do the one thing. And then from there, see where it goes and grow it. But I also think you touched on, you should probably think about the name more. I think that what that does to you to think about the name, like who would have thought we'd be here, it brings you back to gratitude. And I always say gratitude brings you to baseline, right? Because life is like up and down, up and down, up and down. It's always changing and going different angles and shapes and everything like that. But for me, when I practice gratitude, it always brings me to baseline. I could be at the top of the world, super happy or amazing, or I could be, at the lowest end and just like down. But gratitude always brings me right to baseline. And I feel like I know, and I believe that if we're grateful, we will always be at that baseline. It's never going to be all the way up, and it's never going to be all the way down. It's always going to be up and down and all around. But if you're grateful, you'll always be at baseline. You'll always have that inner peace, And it's like I said, I've met a lot of, successful, wealthy individuals, and I've met, a lot of people who are not so successful, and everything in between. And I realize, when you climb the mountain, not that I've climbed every mountain or the mountain, but when you go to a certain height, you realize, oh snap, it's not what I thought it was, And I recall a moment in my life where when I had my first fight, I'm an amateur mixed martial artist, and I've only fought once, but I remember there was a night before the fight, like 2 nights before the fight, where I was doing my last lap. My training partner, who was there, who helped me with my camp, I call it a camp, like I went somewhere, but who helped me with the training. His name is Nick, and he was playing the song, the walkout song that I would walk out to in the fight, because he saw that I was getting tired, and he's like, "We're gonna play this song, and you're gonna finish your laps." I was finishing my laps, and I was like, "Dude, I'm so tired. This is like grueling, you know." But I remember saying, "You're never gonna be here again. This is never gonna be your first time fighting again. This is never gonna be your first time doing a weight cut again. You've been saying that you wanted to do this for years. You always rounded people up together." My friends would literally be like, "Hey, this is the training schedule we're going to do. This is your diet." And I'd always be like, "Cool, I'll see you on Wednesday." I was that guy. And then Wednesday came. "Where are you, bro?" "Oh, sorry. I was playing video games." I would always come up with an excuse. And I remember one day I said, "I'm just going to commit to it." And I did it. And I remember remembering that. And that moment felt like I thought the victory would feel. And when I actually won the fight, and I won it in pretty impressive fashion, I remember feeling upset. And I remember feeling like, is this what it is? Like, is this what it's supposed to be? I thought it was going to be like a movie, like, yeah, I won.
There's like a scientific,
Yeah.
I've heard it on podcasts before, I can't think of it right now, of
yeah.
that's like, that
Yeah.
feeling that's just like,
Yeah.
oh, now I got to get back
Yes.
to, yeah.
And in that moment, I remember my girlfriend calls me, and she's in Miami, and she's having a great time. And she's like, "Honey, I heard you won." Ironically, Desiree was there. She was like her fill-in. And she calls me. She goes, "I heard you won. Are you so excited?" And she was like having a good time. I think it was like Art Basel or something. I was like, "I'm good." She's like, "What do you mean you're good?" I'm like, I'm just happy. Nobody got hurt. It was quick. It's fine." She's like, "Are you going to go out and celebrate?" I'm like, "Not really. I'm just going to go to Red Line Diner and just like eat pancakes and eggs."
I mean, that is a celebration,
Yeah,
dude.
I know,
Red
but
Line is...
she was kind of like taken back.
Yeah.
And the reason why was because I had already won that night. I was cutting weight because I finally made the commitment to myself, and I saw it through. That was my victory.
Wow.
And I feel that a lot of times people don't see that. You know, they go to that thing and they go, "I'll be happy when I get this or when I become that." But, you know, as cliche as it sounds, it's true. It's the journey into becoming that man or becoming that thing or achieving that thing. Being the person who is worthy and who gets to achieve or enjoy that thing. That's the victory, not necessarily the thing itself. You know, and I think that in that moment when I had that quick bit of like discomfort and disappointment, I just went right back to gratitude. I was like, well, I'm grateful that I won, yes. I'm grateful that I didn't hurt the guy and I'm not hurt. I'm grateful I get to live to fight another day. And that just brought me right to baseline, because at the moment I was like down. I was like, oh, this sucks. I thought it was going to be better. And I was just like, wait, I'm going back to baseline, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just how I think about it.
That's a great like example of like how to have that philosophy.
Oh,
that it's
100%.
like the victory is in the trying. The victory is in that like, and obviously you don't know, but like you would have had to do the same thing if you lost the fight, you know, to be like, no, the victory was that I got here, I showed up for the fight, I gave it my all, I didn't give up when I was cutting weight.
You didn't give up on yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to tell my students that when they would go to compete, and even training partners, they always ask like, "Oh, it's my first competition. I'm super excited, but I'm super nervous. Like, you got any advice?" You know, because now I'm a brown belt, which is one belt away from black belt, so I should know everything. You know, and it's like, I always tell them, just have fun and enjoy it. You know, it just, as long as you don't quit, you're not gonna fail. You may lose, but you won't fail. You're only a failure if you quit. Simple as that. So just don't quit. Just give it your all. And if you lose, it's all good, brother.
Yeah, there's, I think I heard it from Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
But it's, you know what quote I'm talking about, and it's a quote that says that like the only way to know for sure that you won't do it is by quitting. That's the only way.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So if you
I'm
fail,
paraphrasing, but
no, but it's true. Like if you fail, if I, you know, don't make that sale or whatever the case might be, or I don't get that client, or the relationship fails, or whatever the case, at least I tried and I gave it my all, and that's it. And if in retrospect I realize I didn't give it my all, cool. I'll self-reflect, learn, adjust, and be better for the next one.
Yeah.
Period. But I'm never gonna quit on myself. I'm never gonna just give up. Never. The past is just a library that you go to, and you just open up the book and go, oh, cool. In 2025, I did this. I said that. I'm not gonna do that again. Check. Good. Move forward. You know, simple as that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Do you have any other questions that you want to ask us? Because we have one more for you, but we'll give you the floor if.
That was really it. You know, like I kind of just wanted to know, where did that name come from, and what were the struggles and lessons that you guys learned, you know, to get to that point where you're like, wow, who would have thought we'd be here? You know, that kind of thing. You know, that was really it. And I feel like you guys shared that. But if there's anything else you want to build up on that, I'd be more than happy to hear it.
No, I think.
I mean,
yeah, I think.
If you got another question, throw it out there.
No, that was really literally
that
was literally it. But actually, now that you say that, for you, because it's already out there, what have been the things that you have experienced in those quiet moments when you're looking at what's going to be your child in the womb of your fiance? Like, have there been moments where you're like, Dad, now I know what that was like, or now I know what you meant, or Mom, now I know what you felt like when I was going out to that party when I was a kid? Maybe you don't feel it now, but like, what's that? You know, people always talk about the moment where they hold their child. I always hear it. They say, you don't know what love is until you hold that child, you know, or forget about everything you know, or whatever the case might be. But they don't really talk about the moment when that child is growing. You know, they only talk about that for the woman. They don't necessarily talk about that for the man. The only things that they talk about for the man is like the traditional, like, oh, you gained weight too, right? Sympathy weight, or oh, you didn't sleep. But it's like, what about all the other stuff? Like the meat on the bones, you know? What is it that you've experienced so far? What kind of introspective or reflective thoughts that you've received from the experience so far?
That's a great question, man.
Yeah.
I mean, so just like, first off, I didn't ever think I wanted to have kids. I was very much like, didn't ever see myself having kids. My mom was super, super happy because she never would have thought. My dad had no clue. He was like, you guys are joking. But I mean, like, I think as I've done the work on myself and continue to do the work on myself, I find out more and more and more about myself and what I really value and what's important to me. And I think because the traumas that I went through as a child, I wrote a narrative about my family and about my life that weren't true. And I missed out on a lot of the valuable family time that I could have been having. The moments where my parents were there to be supportive, and I just was ungrateful because I was so young when I had the trauma stuff happen that, like, I just didn't know any better than to write off whatever I wanted to. Like, I just built a narrative in my head of that is how my life is. And I think as I've done the work and peeled back those layers, I've found more of like what I really wanted was what I was pushing away from when I was younger. So like when I met Desiree, we talked about like I asked her on the drive home from our first date if she would want kids. And when she said yes, I was like, I definitely want kids then. Because I was just like, I could tell, like, I know from doing the work and like from figuring out more about myself that I did, like, that was what I wanted. But I needed to hear it from somebody else that, like, because, like, I knew when I met Desiree, I was like, she's the one. Like, it's in time, this is all going to work out the way it's supposed to. And, like,
it's beautiful, brother.
And it has. And it's just been great. But I think all of that buildup led to, like, when we took the test and found out, man, like, that is such... It's a moment that I think because you worry about, like, am I ready for this? I was like, fuck. I always, like, because I was troubled when I was a kid, was very good at disappointing my parents, like, super good at it. So I, like, always had this image in my head of, like, they're not going to be excited because they don't think I'm ready for this. And I think when we told them, that kind of just flipped everything on its head because of how excited they were, and all of that disbelief and those doubts that I had before about, like, am I ready for this? Am I even going to be able to handle this? Like, am I going to be a good dad? That is all just dissipated. And I know that now, too, because of how strict I am with myself and how disciplined I am and that work that I've done, that I'm going to be great at this. And I can't wait to, like, have that opportunity and to get to grow and, like, just raise a child. And, like, even more important, having a daughter, like, making her feel as complete as possible 100%. Just so, like, she grows up to be the best version of herself. Because I think what I'm really embracing, and like I find moments all the time where I'll just like start crying now, like, and I've been like more emotional since I've gotten sober, and I think that's just coming into touch with yourself.
Because you're no longer numbing that.
Yeah.
Where
So
before
like,
you would just run and be like, yeah, I'm just gonna drink because I
Yeah.
don't want to feel this thing. But
Yeah.
now you're like, talk to me.
Mhm.
What's going on?
So like now I'll like sit and like I'll just have like it happens a lot when I'm driving, and like if I'm by myself, if I'm not with Desiree, because then I'll be like, I'm like super reflective, and I'm also just like, I wonder what she's doing, I wonder if they're okay, like, because it's in my mind all the time now. Like when they went away in December for that wedding, I was like, I'm home without my family. And it's like we haven't had the baby yet, but I was like, I'm home alone right now, with nothing to do, like, and it was kind of crazy to feel that way.
Yeah.
But I think I've just been trying to embrace it, and like you said, a lot of people like they talk about just the woman side of the pregnancy, and I think what's really important to talk about is making the steps to be the father that you're supposed to be, and taking the time to grow into the man that should be raising children, you know.
100%.
And I think that's the journey that should be embraced by men. Like in these 9 months, like you should be doing everything in your power without stressing yourself or the extra work to just make sure you're taking time for yourself and you're growing, because that's what I do every morning. Like
100%.
I let Desiree sleep in, and I go and I do all of my shit, and I make sure I'm on top of it. This way when I get home, I can start taking care of everything she needs me to take care of for her, because she's the one growing the baby, and that's crazy on its own, you know?
That's amazing, man. That it pulls three things for me. I thought of three things when you said that, and thank you for sharing that. And your fiance is blessed to have you, and your child will be blessed to have you as a father for sure. The first thing that it brings up for me when you mentioned trauma was my father. I've since reconnected with him, and you know, the guilt of a parent leaving is that they always apologize again and again. When there's ever a quiet moment to fill the space, they go, "I'm sorry for what I did." At least any parent that's worth the wait that they have. But I remember saying to my father the last time that we saw each other, I said, "You don't need to apologize because I've already forgiven you, number one. But number two, I came to realize that the only reason why I will say to you that I'll never do to you what you did to me is because I'm the one you did it to." It's the only reason. I don't know what it was like to be my mother's husband. I don't know what it was like to have your parents. I don't know what it was like to grow up in the country you grew up in and then go to another country and have that big culture shock. I don't know any of those things. All I know is that you left, but I don't know why. I don't know what it was like to be in your consciousness. I don't know what it was like to have your decisions and situations. And I just remember him looking at me and saying, "Wow, your mother did such a great job," one, but he also opened up about what made him make that decision to accept the separation. And, you know, a lot of the times we think about that like, oh, you should have done this, or this is like, this comes from my trauma and things like that. And, you know, you just don't know. You were not them when they were raising you. So you have to give your parents grace a lot of the times. I'm not saying it to you, but I'm saying it to all of us. Like, we have to give our parents grace a lot of the times because we weren't there. We weren't there with the culture and the norms and the this and the that. We didn't have their traumas. All we can do is learn from them and say, okay, I'm going to deal with it differently. The second thing that comes up for me is something that I always say. Because my mother didn't have the male in her life that was supposed to protect her and make her feel safe, one of my life's missions, and I always say this, is to be the man I knew my mother deserved, right? And, you know, I think that also is one of the things that helps me understand the man that I want to be, you know, because I believe that all women should be respected and protected and honored and things like that. That's why I respect you for saying what you said. But it's the same thing with you. Like, if you feel like there were moments where you weren't fathered correctly, or you weren't, you know, or you didn't have this thing, be that for your child. You know, learn from that and give them that, you know. I think that if you do that, and I'm not a father, I've been wanting to be a father since I was a kid, but but I think that model would prove to be very successful. Because ultimately, dude, all kids really need is love and support. You know, I remember my mother and my family, we were kind of the poorest out of all of our family. Most of our family are immigrants who made it, and went into long-lasting professions. My mother had kids very young, so that didn't really work out. But my grandfather one day went up to my mother and honored her, and he was like, wow, out of all my daughters, you were the one who struggled the most. But I see your kids and I see you, and I know that you've done a good job. And at the time, I didn't think you would, you know. And it's funny because we were the people of the family that's like, who would have thought they'd be here, you know? That,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that we're here, you know, what it says to me is like, that's all we need, because that's all my mother gave me. All my mother gave me was what she had and what she thought that she needed and she didn't get.
Mhm.
And I feel like I turned out to be pretty all right. It's still got some rough edges that maybe will never smooth out, but that's what makes me me, you know? And I'm always grateful for that. But I recall this one moment where, you know, somebody said to my mother came into the room, and I don't want to get emotional, but my mother came into the room, and she had asked me and the person who was sitting next to me and my brother if we wanted something to eat. And I remember we said we were good, and the kid who was next to us put his head down and said to my mom, I wish you were my mother, because at least I would know that you loved me.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting to hear him in particular say that, because I remember hearing him grow up and seeing him have, you know, the latest iPhone or the latest shoes or whatever. And there were moments in Christmas where I was like, dang, Mom, how come I don't have this or whatever, in my ungratitude. And that really clicked for me, because I said, wow, dude, I would have thought you had it all.
Mhm.
But I realized I had everything that I need and more, just off of that statement. And it wasn't a moment of victory for me. I feel for that guy. But it made me realize the things that kids truly need. Because my mother gave me literally everything I needed. And single mothers or single parents always have that guilt. And even parents too, to be fair. Did I do enough? Did I give them enough? I should have given them this. Because society is also telling parents what they should be doing, how they should be raising kids. But dude, like, we don't have it all figured out, you know? And it's just, if you do your best and you know you did your best, that is enough.
Yeah.
Just give yourself grace. That is enough. It's as simple as that. With every endeavor and every avenue and every situation in life, show up, do your best, be your best, and that will be enough. Because that's all you can give.
You gotta give up the unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. And they may be, the other thing is that they may be realistic, just not for you. You know, or they may not be what it is that you actually need or what it is that you actually want. But it might have been packaged and sold to you in such a way that makes you crave it. And when you get it, you realize, I don't really want it.
Yeah.
Or I didn't really want it, or it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. You know, nothing is perfect. I always say the only thing that's perfect in life is God. That's it. And once I let that go and I accept that, I'm good.
Gary Vee always says that. He
Yeah.
said perfect doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's not a...
But what I can do is strive for excellence. That I can do. So that's it. That's all I should do.
Yeah, man. Yeah. We have one question that we ask all the guests. Do you want to do it this time?
Yeah, I can do it. But before I say it, like, thank you so much for what you've said today. It's been very inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Same
being
to
willing
you,
to have
man.
me. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah.
Because good answers come from great questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Nobody's
you.
ever
Thank
told us that before.
So him and I both read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
I've been told to read that, but I haven't
Yeah,
read it yet.
it's a tough read nowadays because it's like over 100 years old. But
Yeah.
the lessons remain the same. And I like to look at the book as like, it's not just about money. It's about a lot more than just that. But in the book, he talks about having like a council of people who you kind of like look to. And most of the people who we've had on have been people like in their own lives. And we've talked about doing an episode of our own of like all the people who we kind of like look at and like who we factor into our decisions.
Yep.
So the question is kind of that, just like when you're trying to make a decision. I know like you've been very open about the fact that you're very self-reflective.
Yeah,
and you look inward. But when you're going to make maybe a hard decision, a life-changing one, maybe you don't know what to do, who are, we usually give like 3 to 5 people of like, who do you look towards that would be like, you would consider to be like, there's like a council in your head, and you're weighing the options, like, who do you look towards? And like always after an interview, we feel like I could probably guess who your people would be.
Yeah.
But please go. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I heard this. It's funny. I heard this in a rap song once by this rap artist named Jadena, who I think is super underrated. But he told a African proverb that was said in his family, and he was like, there's people who build a circle around themselves, people who build a circle around their family, and people who build a circle around the world, right? And I remember hearing that, and I said, wow, it really resonated with me, because, growing up with just me, it's always been me, my mother, my brother, and I said, well, that's how life is, right? We have circles in life, and the smaller the circle is, the closer to us it is. So I always think about that, and I share with my friends, and I call it the theory of circles. The bigger the circle is, the further it is away from you, the less that people should know about you, the closer it is, the more that you reveal and the more vulnerable you are. So when I think about my circle, I think first I go inward, and again, I think about the man I want to be. Then in that same breath, I go to God, and I pray, and I think about the morals and beliefs that I learned from the Bible, from my mentors, and then I go to the people in my life, like my mother, my brother, or my mentor, and other people who have been in that situation, or who have shown me attributes that show me that they have gone through those certain things. Because there's people in your life that play positions, that have a purpose. And I know that kind of sounds like you look at people in your life like a toolbox, or like tools in a toolbox, but it's true. Even in the bad moments, like when you were going through your journey of alcoholism, you had that one friend who you knew like could drink you under the table and was like a good time, and maybe you were that friend in a group, or like you have that one friend who you can go to and share with him, and that's JP most likely, or whatever the case might be. Or then some people have that, it sucks, but some people have that one friend that they're like, I'm going to start a fight because he's going to help me, that kind of thing. So I identify that with people, and I can say like, oh, okay, I'm about to fight in this day of the year, or this month of the year. I'm going to go to this person for advice. I'm not going to go to the person that I go to for tax advice for it. So I think very hard and long about it, and then I go to the people who I think would help me with that. But ultimately, it always boils down to me, God, my mother, and my brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And technically, the man who I want to be.
I think that's a great answer. Like, as soon as I said it, I was like, he's going to say his future self.
Yeah.
He's going to put his future self on his counsel.
It's always always there, but when it's obtained, it's always further away. You're always improving. You're always getting better. And I just feel like the more you think about that, the more you think about the man you want to be, the easier it's going to be to make those decisions. Like when that beautiful, healthy baby comes out of that womb, you're going to say to yourself, like, who's the father I want to be right now? That you're throwing this tantrum. Do I want to be the father who hits you in the hand, or who does the thing that created the trauma for me? Or do I want to be the father who's going to break that cycle? Because that's also what I told my father too. I said, thank you, I'll take it from here. I'll break the cycle.
Yeah, I've done that for
You couldn't do it, and your father couldn't do it, but I'm going to do it, and I'm so honored to be the one. It's an honor. So some people have this mindset of like, why me? But brother, why not you?
Yeah.
If you, then who?
Yeah.
You're alive now. This is it. Do it.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. It won't be easy, but it will be simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. It is what it is, brother. You've been put on this time, in this age, in this part of your generational genealogy timeline. Why not you?
Yeah. I think you brought up a good point midway through the interview, talking about like, it's like morbid to think about that, like you're going to be the one who buries your parents, or that one day you're going to die, or something like that. And I found myself, as I've gone more on this journey, thinking more about stuff like that.
100%.
Because it's absolutely debilitating and unrealistic to be thinking in the way of like, I'm gonna live forever, or like these decisions don't matter, or you know, like that is absolutely ridiculous to live that way.
100%.
And I'm not saying that you should just like run around thinking all day about how like death is gonna come and get you one day. But it's also thinking in the sense of that, like, you know, thinking of that that, you know, if we're going by statistics, that 80-year-old self, that's roughly what all of us get. You know, that's never exact, but what do you want to do at that time? Where are you going to be?
Exactly. And also too, that's the beauty of life, man. I want the sadness, I want the fear, I want the joy, I want the moments of jitters. I want it all. Give me all of it. Give me all of it. Because that is what life is. Life is made up of that. It's not the freaking good times that you post on Instagram only. It's behind the scenes. Like, you know, both of our partners are content creators. While they do their thing, they take advantage of Instagram, which we should probably take some cues from them. But they post one photo out of 100. This angle, this lighting, this, that, this concept for the video. And it's like, the edits are just as beautiful as the finished product. Because you need to go through that first to get the finished product. That journey is what it is. You know, and to speak about the decisions, another thing that I go back to, another like bookmark in the book of, you know, philosophies and things that I live by, like, life is literally all about what you say yes to and what you say no to. When you wake up, the first thought in your head can be a negative one. Will you say yes to that and run with that, or will you say no to that? You know, I remember being in the hospital bed and having the injury that I have, and I was just like, man, this sucks. This is terrible. And I was just there about to say that with my mouth. Saying it in my head, I'm like, am I ever going to do this normally? Am I ever going to do that normally? And I remember saying, like, wait a second. This is where so many people have been before me and will be after me. They will be depressed. They will decide, maybe this is where addiction starts. Maybe this is where the why me starts. But I'm going to take this situation and I'm going to be the best that I can be, and I'm going to come out better than I was. This is an opportunity for me. In that moment, I was starting to say yes to the negative, starting to say yes to the woe is me, starting to say yes to the victim mentality. But thank God, through the grace of God, I was able to have that pause and go, I'm going to say no to that, and yes to the fact that this is an opportunity for growth, exponential growth. And it's not about, like I said, it's not about being perfect. It's just about understanding that life is all about what you say yes to and what you say no to, and every part of life is an ingredient that makes up life. Literally, it just give it all to me, because that's what life is.
Yeah, it's like that. I think it's a Jim Carrey quote where he says, like, I wish everybody could get wealth and fame and achieve all their dreams and realize that it wasn't the answer.
Exactly.
Because if we could all just get that, like, so easily, and for some people it does come easily, you know, and like, but regardless of that, like, it wouldn't mean anything if you didn't work hard for it.
Yes. And like, dude, that doesn't have to be your version of success. You know, for you, your version of success could just be your freaking baby girl right there, having a successful podcast and just like being able to impact people. For you, it could be being a great father and creating good content with your best friend, you know, and there are other, you know, layers and avenues of that. But it's like, dude, define your own version of success and go there. That's why I always go back to the man I want to be, because the man that I want to be is tied into my version of success. And if I just keep doing that and not allowing other people to tell me what my version of success is, because by definition, at least for me, if somebody's telling me my version of success, they're also telling me the version of myself that I need to be. They're also trying to sell me on who I should be. But if I'm always just focused on that, on my version of success, then I'm focused on the man who I want to be, because the man who I want to be is going to be the person whose outcome is that version of success. Simple as that. You know, so yeah.
It's like an internal expectation that can be controlled by you.
Yeah, 100%.
That it's like nobody can define the fact of like I didn't show up as the man
Yeah.
that I was today. You know.
Exactly.
I feel like you're the definite. I read every single day a verse out of "Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life" by Wayne Dyer, and I feel like you are the exemplification of that.
Oh
Just
my
like
God.
the way you
That's a
think
quote,
is
yeah, you bring
exactly
that up,
how
yeah.
you're going to be.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Glory to God, man. I have to, like I said, I have to give glory to God and thank my mother and my brother and the people in my life who have either paved the way, showed me the way, or helped me, you know, or imparted in me. Even those who imparted the negative that made me go, ooh, I don't want to do that. You know, every single person was an ingredient into the thing that makes me who I am. So I can't, you know, I can't take the glory for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, you know, I think it's important too to just be like, you know, in real time, like what you're doing right now is redefining like the expectations of what it means to be a man, how it means to show up, and that like the definition of who you are is way important than whether it's social media or society's expectations or what your own family did or and that's like a beautiful thing to watch, man. I think that like taking stock of that, like moments like this are why him and I started this, and we're really glad to have you here as
Thank
part
you,
of
man.
that.
I'm grateful to be here. Truly,
Yeah.
this conversation was just as impactful as it was for you. It was for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to share this with people.
I think you should go on more podcasts, man. Yeah, I really think you should.
Yeah, podcast guest and real estate agent could be your thing.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
You
exactly.
should get on a real estate podcast.
yes,
yeah.
You would do great there.
That would be great. I mean, hey, listen,
Yeah.
whatever life opens up, you know, I didn't force this, and I'm not going to force the next one. So, it's whatever God has in store, and whatever opportunity is there, and if I can seize it, then I will.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So then I'm just going to continue trying to be the man I want to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a great time. Now, if you want to look into the camera, anything that you want to promote, even if it's like your real estate stuff, anything, a message that you'd like to share, whatever you want to say, floor is yours.
Well, I'm a real estate agent. Follow me at Manny Sells Upstate. I work with the Upstate Curious team at Compass. Yeah, just thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're in a dark place, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Whether you believe in God or not, there's a God that loves you and created you for a purpose. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that was a
of
great
course,
conversation, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dude, that was amazing.
Absolutely, man. Bring it in.